You're born in darkness and learn to breathe recycled air that tastes of metal shavings and human desperation. The stench of unwashed bodies, rotting corpses, and industrial waste becomes your lullaby. My name is Kael Thorne, former Underhive ganger turned Imperial Guard conscript. I survived 17 years in the deepest slums of Hive Tertius before the commissars dragged me into the light. You think that makes me lucky, but you don't know what I've seen in those endless corridors where sunlight never reaches. Down there, children learn to kill before they learn to read. We feast on corpse-starch and drink recycled piss while the Spireborn above us feast on real meat. The Emperor protects, they say, but his light never penetrated our darkness. This is my testimony of life in the Underhive, where humanity shows its truest, most savage face, and where every breath stolen is a victory against the abyss. Chapter 1. The Forgotten Deep Life in Underhive. Tertius begins before birth, in the womb of a mother who hasn't seen natural light in 3 generations. My earliest memory isn't of warmth or comfort, it's of the constant mechanical hum that vibrates through every rusted beam and corroded wall of our sector. The sound never stops, a grinding symphony of ancient machinery that keeps our pathetic corner of the hive from collapsing into the toxic depths below. Our home was a 15-meter square hab unit that housed 12 people across 3 families. The Thornes, my bloodline, claimed the northwestern corner near the broken ventilation grate that occasionally whispered promises of cleaner air from levels above. My parents, Jorik and Mella, had carved out this space through violence and cunning during the sector wars of 987.M41, when the Water Guild tried to claim our territory for their filtration operations. The walls wept constantly, not water, but a brownish substance that tasted of rust and regret. We learned early not to drink it, though desperation sometimes made children forget. Those who did developed the weeping sickness, their eyes streaming the same brown tears until their bodies dried to husks. I watched my cousin Sareth succumb to it when I was 6, her tiny frame convulsing as the toxins ate her from within. Our section of the Underhive stretched for kilometers in every direction, a maze of corridors and chambers carved from the bones of the planet itself. Administratum records called it sub-level Gamma 7, but we knew it as the Forgotten Deep. Here, approximately 47,000 souls scratched out existence in conditions that would horrify even the most hardened Imperial citizen. The population fluctuated constantly. Births were rare, deaths common, and sometimes entire families simply vanished into the darker reaches where even we feared to tread. Food came in 3 varieties: corpse-starch rations distributed by the Guild of Flesh, protein cubes rendered from vermin caught in the lower tunnels, and whatever organic matter we could scavenge from the waste chutes of the levels above. The Guild of Flesh operated from a fortified compound in Central Plaza, their red-robed servitors grinding everything: dead gangers, failed mutants, expired livestock, into the grey paste that sustained us. We queued for hours each day, fighting over our allotted portions while Guild enforcers watched with shock mauls ready. Water was even more precious than food. The aqua mechanics controlled every drop that flowed through their corroded pipes, demanding payment in flesh, favors, or information. Their pumping stations dotted our territory like mechanical shrines, each one guarded by augmented brutes who'd kill for a broken valve or loose fitting. The water itself was brown and thick, requiring careful filtration through rags and sand before consumption. Those who drank it straight often developed the gut rot, their intestines liquefying over weeks of agony. Children in the Forgotten Deep learned survival before language. We understood which shadows held danger, which sounds meant death approaching, which smells indicated edible refuse. My earliest lessons came from watching older kids navigate the gang territories that carved our world into tiny kingdoms of violence. The Rust Prophets controlled the eastern approaches with their jury-rigged weapons and religious fervor. The Bone Merchants ruled the southern reaches, selling skeletal remains to the corpse-starch factories. The Chrome Skulls dominated the central markets with their augmented fighters and scavenged technology. Education, as the upper hivers understood it, didn't exist. Knowledge was practical and immediate: how to pick locks, where to find ammunition, which chemicals could be mixed for explosives or poison. Reading was a luxury few possessed, though some gangs kept scribes, who could decipher the Imperial Gothic warnings plastered throughout our sectors. I learned my letters from Brother Matthias, a failed seminary student who'd fallen from grace and descended to our level. He taught a handful of us the basics in exchange for protection from the more violent gangs. The spiritual life of the Underhive centered around the cult of the God Emperor, though our understanding bore little resemblance to the cathedral rituals of the upper spires. Our priests were half-mad prophets who preached from rusted platforms, their sermons mixing imperial doctrine with the desperate hope of people abandoned by their god. We carved crude aquilas into the walls and whispered prayers to the golden throne, though the Emperor's light seemed impossibly distant from our darkness. Sleep came in shifts, with families rotating guard duty throughout the night cycle. Though day and night had no meaning in our eternal twilight, the dangers multiplied in the dark periods when even the minimal lighting failed. Mutant packs emerged from the deeper tunnels, their forms twisted by generations of toxic exposure. Plague zombies shambled through abandoned sectors, their flesh rotting while unholy vitality kept them moving. Worst of all were the pale children, albino cannibals who hunted in perfect silence and left only gnawed bones as evidence of their presence. My father Jorik was a tunnel runner for the Brass Syndicate, carrying messages and contraband through the maze of service corridors that connected our level to the markets above. His routes were carefully memorized secrets passed down through generations of his family. Each run risked encounters with rival gangs, Imperial patrols, or the automated defense systems that still functioned in some sections. He carried a stub pistol with 3 bullets, one for enemies, one for emergencies, and one for himself if capture seemed inevitable. Mother Mella worked the reclamation lines, sorting through waste materials dropped from the upper levels. Her hands were permanently stained black from handling industrial refuse, and her lungs rattled with the accumulated dust of a dozen toxic substances. She could identify valuable components by touch alone: circuit boards worth trading to the tech cults, metal alloys coveted by the weaponsmiths, rare chemicals that could be refined into medicine or poison. The social structure of our world was brutally simple. The strong took what they wanted, and the weak survived by cunning, alliances, or sheer luck. Gangs provided the only real protection, offering membership to those who proved their worth through violence or useful skills. Children as young as 10 carried blades and knew how to use them. By 12, most had killed at least once, whether human, mutant, or the various predators that stalked our tunnels. Disease was a constant companion, spreading through our crowded quarters with vicious efficiency. The red flux turned victims into walking fountains of blood. The shaking sickness caused uncontrollable tremors until the afflicted convulsed themselves to death. The crawling death manifested as insects burrowing under the skin, driving the infected insane before consuming them from within. We had no doctors, only bone setters and poison brewers who charged extortionate prices for dubious cures. Chapter 2. First Blood. My initiation into true violence came on my 13th birthday. Though birthdays were meaningless concepts, measured only by the number of times you'd survived another year of hell. The Chrome Skulls had decided our sector's tribute payments were insufficient, and their war boss, a massive brute named Ironjaw Krug, sent a collection party to make an example of the Thorne family. The morning began like any other in the Forgotten Deep. The recycling plants coughed their poisonous exhaust into our already toxic air, and the distant sound of explosions echoed from gang warfare in the industrial sectors. I was helping Mother Mella sort through the latest waste drop when young Peter Vasquez came running through our hab block, his eyes wide with terror and his breath coming in short gasps. "Chrome Skulls," he wheezed, clutching his side where a crude blade had opened a shallow wound. "They took the Hendricks family, put Old Man Hendricks on hooks in Central Plaza. Said the Thorns are next unless tribute doubles by sunset." His words carried the weight of absolute truth. In the Underhive, such threats were never empty posturing. The Chrome Skulls had maintained their territory through calculated brutality, For over 3 decades, Father Jorik emerged from the tunnel entrance where he'd been preparing for another smuggling run. His face had gone pale beneath the accumulated grime, and his hand instinctively moved to the stub pistol holstered at his hip. "How many?" he asked, his voice carrying the quiet authority that had kept our family alive through countless crises. "8 of them," Peter replied. "Full battle kit, auto pistols, chain weapons, and that new lieutenant of theirs with the augmented arms. They're systematically hitting every family that's behind on payments. Word is, they've got orders to collect 50% more tribute from every sector by month's end." The implications were clear to everyone present. Our family's tribute amounted to nearly half our monthly income, leaving barely enough for food and water. Doubling that payment would mean starvation for some of our children, or forcing the women into the flesh trade that operated from the lower commercial levels. Neither option was acceptable to my father's code of honor. Within an hour, representatives from 7 families had gathered in our HAB unit to discuss options. The meeting was tense, with everyone speaking in hushed voices while children stood guard at the entrances. These weren't formal allies. In the Underhive, alliances shifted like smoke based on immediate survival needs. But we shared common enemies and mutual desperation. Marcus Chen, whose family controlled a small water filtration operation, spoke first. "We could pool resources, hire the Rust Prophets to hit their weapons cache in Sector 7. Take out their ammunition supplies before they can mount a major offensive." His suggestion carried merit. The Rust Prophets were skilled fighters motivated by their twisted religious beliefs, and they harbored old grudges against the Chrome Skulls. "The Prophets want payment in young flesh," countered Elena Vasquez, Peter's mother and a woman whose survival instincts were legendary. "They're recruiting for their ritual combats against the mutant clans. You willing to sacrifice your son to their blood sport?" Her words carried brutal honesty that cut through any romantic notions about hiring mercenaries. Old Dmitry Kors, the eldest among us at nearly 50 years old, raised his augmented hand for attention. His fingers had been replaced with mechanical claws after an industrial accident in his youth, and the servos whined softly as he moved. "There's another option. My contacts in the Bone Merchants say the Chrome Skulls have a weakness. Ironjaw Krug's been sampling too much of the combat stims they cook in their chem labs. He's developing the Shaker's syndrome. His reflexes are compromised during withdrawal periods." The conversation continued for 2 hours, covering every possible strategy from negotiation to outright warfare. Some advocated fleeing to deeper levels where the Chrome Skulls rarely ventured, though that meant abandoning everything we'd built and facing the horrors that lurked in the absolute darkness below. Others suggested appealing to the administratum representatives who occasionally descended from the upper levels, though Imperial justice was notoriously indifferent to Underhive conflicts. Father made the final decision with characteristic directness. "We fight," he announced, his voice carrying the finality of a death sentence. "Running means starting over with nothing. Paying means slow starvation. Fighting means we either win our freedom or die with dignity intact." His words sparked arguments and counter-arguments, but the basic logic was unassailable. All options carried enormous risks, but only fighting offered the possibility of improving our situation. The preparation took 6 hours. Weapons were retrieved from hidden caches scattered throughout our territory. My father's old military training from his brief stint in the PDF became invaluable as he planned our defensive strategy. The HAB block's layout offered several choke points where superior firepower could be neutralized by tactical positioning. Escape routes were cleared and marked, and non-combatants were moved to secure positions in the deepest tunnels. My own role in the coming battle was initially limited to running messages and carrying ammunition. At 13, I was considered too young for direct combat, though I'd been learning weapons handling for 3 years. Father had taught me to strip and clean his stub pistol, and I could handle the crude autogun that Dmitry had jury-rigged from scavenged Imperial Guard components. However, as the afternoon progressed and the scope of the Chrome Skull's assault became clear, those limitations were rapidly discarded. The attack came at sunset, not that we could see the sun from our depths, but the shift change in the upper levels created predictable patterns in noise and activity that marked the transition. Ironjaw Krug led 12 fighters through the main access tunnel, their chrome skull tattoos gleaming in the flickering light of burning promethium barrels. Each warrior carried professional-grade weapons that demonstrated their gang's success in extracting tribute from dozens of territories. The first exchange of gunfire lasted only minutes, but felt like hours. The enclosed space magnified every shot into thunderous explosions that left ears ringing and eyes streaming from cordite smoke. Father's defensive positions proved their worth as the Chrome Skulls discovered that advancing required exposing themselves to crossfire from multiple angles. Their superior weapons were partially negated by our knowledge of the terrain and carefully prepared fields of fire. However, the Chrome Skulls' tactical discipline quickly became apparent. These weren't desperate scavengers fighting for scraps. They were experienced warriors who'd conquered territory through systematic application of violence. After the initial assault failed to break our defenses, Ironjaw Krug pulled his fighters back and began methodically destroying our infrastructure. They targeted the water pipes first, sending precious liquid flooding across the hab block floors. Next came the power cables, plunging sections of our territory into absolute darkness. My moment of truth came when young Elena Vasquez was caught in the open during one of their flanking maneuvers. A chrome skull fighter with augmented legs had scaled the vertical access shaft and was preparing to gun her down from an elevated position. Without conscious thought, I raised Dimitri's autogun and squeezed the trigger, sending 3 rounds center mass into the attacker's torso. The impacts spun him around and sent him tumbling 30 meters to the metal deck below. The feeling that followed my first kill was neither triumph nor horror, just a strange emptiness, as if some essential part of my humanity had been carved away and discarded. Elena lived, but the cost was measured in innocence lost and lines crossed that could never be uncrossed. Father found me afterward, still holding the smoking autogun, and simply nodded his approval. No words were needed or offered. The battle's conclusion came through negotiation rather than total victory. Dimitri's intelligence proved accurate. Ironjaw Krug's combat performance deteriorated rapidly as his stimulant levels dropped, and his fighters began questioning his tactical decisions. When 2 more Chrome Skulls fell to our defensive fire, the survivors agreed to parley. The final terms reduced our tribute by 20% in exchange for ending hostilities, a compromise that saved face for both sides while preventing further casualties. That night, as we treated wounds and counted ammunition, I realized that my childhood in the Forgotten Deep had effectively ended. The other families looked at me differently now, not as Jorik's boy, but as a proven fighter worthy of respect. The weight of that recognition was both burden and privilege, marking my entry into the harsh adult world that governed survival in the Underhive. Chapter 3: The Gang's Gospel. The weeks following our conflict with the Chrome Skulls brought unexpected consequences that would reshape not only my understanding of Underhive politics, but the fundamental power structure of our entire sector. Word of our successful defense had spread through the communication networks that connected every gang, family, and individual criminal enterprise across the Forgotten Deep. Suddenly, the Thorne name carried weight in conversations conducted in shadowy alcoves and abandoned machinery chambers. The first indication that our world was changing came through Brother Matthias, the fallen priest who'd taught me to read. He arrived at our Hab unit 3 days after the battle, his usual collection of religious pamphlets replaced by carefully folded pieces of parchment bearing gang sigils and coded messages. His weathered face carried an expression of concern mixed with opportunity as he spread the documents across our communal eating surface. 5 different organizations have sent recruitment offers, he explained, pointing to each document in turn. The Rust Prophets want your combat experience for their holy wars against the mutant clans in the eastern sectors. The Bone Merchants are offering training positions in their body disposal operations. Most interesting, the Iron Covenant is proposing a formal alliance that would make your family junior partners in their weapons smuggling enterprise. Father studied each offer with the methodical attention he'd once given to military intelligence reports during his brief service with the Planetary Defense Force. The Iron Covenant's proposal was indeed the most attractive. They controlled the primary arms-dealing networks that supplied small weapons throughout the lower levels, and their protection would significantly improve our family's security and income. However, gang alliances in the Underhive came with obligations that often proved more dangerous than the benefits they provided. The decision-making process revealed layers of political complexity that I'd never understood as a child, focused primarily on basic survival. Every gang operated within overlapping spheres of influence, territorial agreements, and mutual defense pacts that created an intricate web of relationships spanning the entire Underhive structure. Choosing one alliance necessarily meant making enemies of their rivals, while remaining independent left us vulnerable to predatory organizations seeking to expand their influence. Marcus Chen brought additional intelligence gathered through his water filtration business, which required him to maintain relationships with suppliers throughout the vertical hierarchy of the Hive. "The Administratum is planning another census expedition," he reported, his voice carrying the worried tone that such announcements always generated. "Full Arbeit support, with Commissar oversight for population documentation and tribute assessment. They're particularly interested in identifying organized resistance groups and unauthorized weapons manufacturing." Imperial attention was universally feared in the Underhive, where the vast majority of economic activity operated outside official channels, and most residents possessed no legal documentation of their existence. Census expeditions typically resulted in mass arrests, summary executions, and the destruction of entire family structures as the imperial bureaucracy attempted to impose order on communities that had operated autonomously for generations. The Iron Covenant's lieutenant, a scarred veteran named Torvin Blackhand, arrived for negotiations 2 days later, accompanied by 4 bodyguards whose augmented limbs and professional weapons demonstrated their organization's substantial resources. Torvin himself was a walking advertisement for successful criminal enterprise. His clothing was clean and well-maintained. His augmentations were high-quality Imperial technology rather than crude scavenged modifications, and his manner suggested someone accustomed to having his words carry immediate weight. "The Thorne family has demonstrated combat effectiveness and territorial control," he began, his voice carrying the formal tone used for important business transactions. "My organization can offer protection, steady income through our distribution networks, and advancement opportunities for qualified individuals. In exchange, we require exclusive loyalty, participation in collective defense operations, and tribute payments calculated at 15% of gross family income." The negotiation process extended across 4 separate meetings, each one revealing additional layers of the Iron Covenant's organizational structure and business operations. They controlled weapon shipments from corrupt Imperial Guard armories in the upper levels, operated illegal ammunition manufacturing facilities powered by stolen industrial equipment, and maintained intelligence networks that provided early warning about law enforcement activities and rival gang movements. Their territorial holdings included 17 hab blocks across 3 sectors, 2 major marketplace complexes, and exclusive access to the mechanical workshops where skilled artificers modified stolen weapons for sale throughout the Underhive. More importantly, their membership included former military specialists whose training provided tactical advantages that had allowed the Iron Covenant to survive and expand, while numerous rival organizations had been destroyed by Imperial crackdowns or gang warfare. However, joining their organization would fundamentally alter our family's identity and independence. Gang members were expected to prioritize collective interests over family loyalty, participate in violent operations against designated enemies, and accept assignment to duties that might separate families for extended periods. The Iron Covenant's code of conduct prohibited certain types of criminal activity, particularly those involving Imperial authorities, while requiring participation in others that could result in death sentences if discovered by law enforcement. During the 3rd negotiation session, I was permitted to observe the proceedings while remaining silent unless directly addressed. This privilege reflected my new status as a proven fighter rather than merely Jorik's son, and it provided my first comprehensive education in the political dynamics that governed our world. The conversation revealed that the Chrome Skull's recent aggression was part of a larger territorial expansion campaign, financed by off-world criminal syndicates. seeking to establish smuggling routes through our sector. The larger picture involves more than local gang politics, Thorne explained, spreading a crude map across our table that showed the various criminal territories throughout the Underhive. Imperial intelligence has identified our sector as a key transit point for weapons flowing to heretical cult activities in the outer systems. They're planning major enforcement operations designed to disrupt those supply chains, which means increased pressure on all criminal organizations operating in this area. The implications were staggering. Our small-scale survival activities had unknowingly placed us in the middle of conflicts involving Imperial security forces, off-world criminal enterprises, and potentially treasonous activities that could result in orbital bombardment of our entire section of the Hive. The Iron Covenant's protection might be our only chance of surviving the coming Imperial attention, but accepting their alliance would make us legitimate targets for both law enforcement and rival criminal organizations. Father requested 24 hours to make the final decision, a delay that Thorne accepted with professional understanding. That evening, our family held the most serious discussion of our lives, weighing survival against independence while acknowledging that both options carried potentially fatal consequences. The conversation continued through the night cycle, with each family member contributing perspectives based on their individual experiences and understanding of our situation. Mother Mella's viewpoint proved particularly insightful. Her work in the reclamation lines had provided extensive contact with residents throughout our sector, giving her unique knowledge of how other families were responding to the changing political situation. Half the independent families have already made alliance decisions, she reported. The smart ones are choosing sides now, while they can still negotiate favorable terms. Those who wait much longer will be forced to accept whatever protection is available when the Imperial enforcement operations begin. My younger sister, Katerina, barely 11 years old, but already demonstrating the survival instincts necessary for Underhive life, offered a perspective that surprised everyone present. If the Imperials are coming anyway, maybe we should consider legal documentation through the administratum offices. Other families have purchased citizenship papers through corrupt clerks. It's expensive, but it provides protection against arbitrary arrest during enforcement sweeps. Her suggestion sparked intense debate about the possibility of transitioning from criminal survival to quasi-legitimate existence within Imperial society. Several families had successfully made such transitions, typically by purchasing forged documentation that established their legal residence in the upper levels while maintaining their actual homes in the Underhive. However, such arrangements required substantial financial resources and political connections that our family currently lacked. The discussion was interrupted by emergency signals echoing through the communication networks that connected our hab block with the broader Underhive community. Elena Vasquez arrived within minutes, her face pale with fear and her words tumbling over each other in her haste to deliver critical intelligence. Imperial Arbeit squads have begun preliminary reconnaissance operations in the eastern sectors. 3 families have been arrested on charges of weapons trafficking, and their HAB units have been sealed pending full investigation. The news crystallized our decision-making process by eliminating the luxury of extended deliberation. Imperial enforcement operations typically followed predictable patterns. Preliminary arrests to gather intelligence, followed by systematic raids designed to capture major criminal leaders and destroy organized resistance capability. Families caught without protection during such operations faced imprisonment, execution, or forced labor assignment in the upper-level industrial facilities. Father announced our decision at dawn. "We accept the Iron Covenant's terms," he declared, his voice carrying the finality of someone acknowledging that our independent existence had become unsustainable. Better to maintain some control over our fate by choosing our allies than to wait for events to choose for us. The formal induction ceremony took place in the Iron Covenant's primary meeting hall, a converted machinery chamber deep in Sector 12, where ancient industrial equipment provided both concealment and defensive positions. Approximately 60 gang members attended the proceedings, representing every level of the organization's hierarchy, from new recruits to senior lieutenants who'd survived decades of criminal warfare. Thorne Blackhand administered the Oath of Loyalty personally, a ritual that involved symbolic cutting of the palm and mixing blood with sacred machine oil, while swearing allegiance to the organization's principles and leadership structure. The ceremony concluded with the presentation of gang identification, crude tattoos applied by skilled artists, using equipment that blended imperial religious imagery with criminal symbology. As the needle inscribed the Iron Covenant's sigil into my left forearm, I understood that my childhood in the Underhive had truly ended. The mark identified me as a sworn member of a criminal organization, subject to imperial justice if discovered by law enforcement, but also entitled to the protection and support of brothers who would kill and die to defend collective interests. The pain was nothing compared to the weight of decisions that had brought me to this moment. Chapter 4: Blood and Brotherhood. The Iron Covenant's initiation process extended far beyond the formal ceremony that had marked our family's acceptance into their ranks. True membership required proving combat effectiveness, tactical reliability, and absolute loyalty through a series of increasingly dangerous assignments that would either forge us into worthy brothers or eliminate us as potential security risks. My first test came only 3 days after receiving the gang's mark, when Lieutenant Torvin Blackhand summoned me for what he termed advanced education in organizational priorities. The mission briefing took place in the Covenant's primary weapons cache, a heavily fortified chamber carved from the Hive's original foundation stone and reinforced with stolen Imperial construction materials. The walls were lined with weapon racks containing everything from crude slug throwers assembled in Underhive workshops to sophisticated laser rifles obviously stolen from Planetary Defense Force armories. The air smelled of gun oil and cordite, with undertones of the sacred machine incense that the Covenant's tech specialists burned during weapon maintenance rituals. The Chrome Skulls have decided our recent territorial agreements don't apply to their off-world business partners, Torvin explained, spreading reconnaissance photos across a steel planning table. They're allowing foreign smuggling operations to use transit routes through sectors that our treaty specifically designated as neutral territory. This represents a direct challenge to our authority that requires immediate response. The target was a warehouse complex in Sector 15, where Chrome Skull's enforcers provided security for an illegal shipment of combat pharmaceuticals destined for heretical cult activities in the outer system. Intelligence gathered by Covenant informants indicated the facility contained approximately 50,000 thrones worth of banned stimulants, combat enhancers, and psychoactive substances that could fund major criminal operations throughout the subsector. More importantly, the shipment's off-world origins meant its seizure would send a clear message to external criminal organizations that the Iron Covenant controlled all contraband trafficking through our territory. Failure to respond decisively would invite additional challenges to our authority and potentially spark a broader territorial war that could destroy decades of careful political maneuvering. My assignment was to accompany a 6-person strike team led by veteran fighter Sergeant Voss Ironlung, whose augmented respiratory system allowed him to operate in the toxic environments common throughout the deeper Underhive levels. The team's composition reflected the Iron Covenant's professional approach to organized violence. Each member possessed specialized skills and equipment designed to ensure mission success with minimal casualties among our personnel. Voss himself was a former Imperial Guard stormtrooper whose discharge from military service had resulted from psychological evaluation rather than combat injury. His understanding of small unit tactics was encyclopedic, and his collection of military-grade weapons included several items that were definitely stolen from Imperial armories. His leadership style emphasized careful planning and decisive execution, qualities that had made him one of the Covenant's most successful operational commanders. The other team members included Marcus Wire Chen, the son of our family ally, whose technical expertise in electronic security systems made him invaluable for bypassing alarm networks and automated defenses. His nickname derived from his ability to defeat virtually any electrical protection system using improvised tools and intuitive understanding of Imperial technology. Despite his youth, Wire's reputation for technical skill was legendary throughout the criminal community. Helena Vex brought expertise in close-quarters combat developed through years of gladiatorial competition in the Underhive's illegal fighting circuits. Her augmented reflexes and extensive scarification marked her as someone who'd survived dozens of life-or-death encounters against opponents who possessed every conceivable advantage. Her weapon of choice was a pair of customized chain knives that could penetrate most personal armor, while maintaining the speed necessary for her aggressive fighting style. Dimitri's nephew, Pavel Ghost Kors, possessed inherited family talents for stealth infiltration that had been refined through professional training with the Covenant's intelligence specialists. His ability to move silently through complex terrain was almost supernatural, and his knowledge of Underhive tunnel systems extended to areas that even experienced guides avoided. Ghost's psychological profile indicated someone who genuinely enjoyed the mental challenges involved in defeating security measures and evading detection. The final team member, a massive individual known simply as Breacher, specialized in explosive demolition and obstacle removal. His collection of improvised explosive devices included everything from crude grenades, assembled from industrial chemicals, to sophisticated shaped charges capable of defeating hardened Imperial fortifications. Breacher's apparent enthusiasm for destruction was tempered by professional expertise that ensured his explosives achieved precise tactical objectives without unnecessary collateral damage. The planning phase extended across 2 full days, with every aspect of the operation receiving detailed analysis and multiple contingency preparation. Sector 15's layout was memorized from architectural diagrams obtained through corrupt administratum clerks, and approaches were planned using intelligence gathered by Covenant reconnaissance specialists who'd maintained surveillance on Chrome Skull's activities for several weeks. The warehouse complex consisted of 4 interconnected buildings surrounding a central courtyard that provided vehicle access for loading operations. Chrome Skull's security included 8 guards equipped with military pattern weapons and augmented with combat modifications that enhanced their effectiveness in close quarters fighting. However, their defensive positions were designed primarily to deter casual theft, rather than repel organized assault by experienced fighters with professional equipment. Our attack plan emphasized speed and overwhelming violence designed to complete the mission before Chrome Skull's reinforcements could respond. The operation would begin with Ghost and Wire disabling the facility's alarm systems and external communications equipment, eliminating the guard's ability to summon assistance. Simultaneously, Helena and Breacher would establish overwatch positions covering the main entrances, while Voss and I approached the primary target building through service tunnels that connected to the warehouse's loading docks. The infiltration phase required navigating 3 kilometers of maintenance tunnels filled with hazards ranging from automated security systems to the various predators that made their homes in the Underhive's forgotten spaces. The tunnels themselves were artifacts from the Hive's original construction, featuring Imperial engineering that had operated continuously for millennia, despite minimal maintenance and constant exposure to toxic industrial waste. Moving through the tunnel network provided my first comprehensive understanding of the Underhive's true scale and complexity. The passages stretched in every direction, connecting not only the various gang territories I knew, but extending to areas that existed only in rumor and legend. Some tunnels descended to depths where the air itself became unbreathable, while others climbed toward the upper levels, where Imperial citizens lived in luxury incomprehensible to Underhive residents. The journey took 4 hours, with multiple delays for bypassing security checkpoints and waiting for patrol schedules to create movement opportunities. Voss used the travel time for tactical instruction, sharing combat techniques developed through years of professional military service and criminal warfare. His teaching style emphasized practical application over theoretical knowledge, demonstrating specific methods for defeating common types of opponents and security systems. The key to surviving combat is controlling the engagement timeline, he explained, while we waited for an automated sentry gun to complete its patrol cycle. Most fighters, even experienced ones, make decisions based on immediate tactical situation rather than considering how current actions affect future options. Professional soldiers understand that winning requires thinking 3 moves ahead while maintaining flexibility to adapt when circumstances change unexpectedly. His lessons continued throughout our approach, covering everything from proper weapon maintenance procedures to psychological techniques for maintaining combat effectiveness under extreme stress. The education was invaluable, but it also reinforced my understanding that joining the Iron Covenant had committed me to a life of violence that would only end with death or permanent injury, severe enough to eliminate my usefulness to the organization. The assault began precisely at the predetermined time, with explosions marking breach's demolition of the facility's power distribution system. The coordinated attack eliminated the Guard's night vision advantage while creating confusion that prevented organized resistance to our advance. Ghost and Wire had successfully disabled the alarm systems, ensuring that our operation would remain undetected by outside observers until mission completion. My role during the actual combat was primarily support for Sergeant Voss as we systematically cleared the warehouse buildings of remaining Chrome Skull's personnel. The fighting was intense but brief, with the enemy's numerical advantage negated by our superior planning and equipment. The professional weapons stolen from Imperial armories proved their worth against opponents armed primarily with crude Underhive manufactures and scavenged civilian equipment. The most significant resistance came from the facility's senior security officer, a Chrome Skull's veteran whose combat augmentations included reinforced bone structure and enhanced muscle fiber that allowed him to absorb damage that would incapacitate normal humans. His determination to protect the warehouse forced a prolonged firefight that consumed valuable ammunition and time while threatening to attract unwanted attention from other criminal organizations operating in the area. Helena Vex ultimately resolved the situation through direct assault, her chain knives penetrating the officer's armor at vulnerable joints, while her augmented reflexes allowed her to avoid his return attacks. The combat was savage and personal, reflecting the deeply held grudges that divided various Underhive gangs and made peaceful coexistence virtually impossible. The officer's death eliminated the final obstacle to mission completion, allowing us to proceed with our primary objectives. The warehouse contained exactly the contraband described in our intelligence briefings. Industrial quantities of combat pharmaceuticals that represented months of production by sophisticated chemical laboratories located in the outer systems. The seizure of such valuable merchandise would provide the Iron Covenant with substantial financial resources while denying those same materials to potential enemies throughout the region. However, the discovery of shipping documents revealed information that fundamentally altered our understanding of the criminal networks operating throughout our sector. The pharmaceutical shipments were part of a larger operation involving corrupt Imperial officials, off-world criminal syndicates, and heretical cult organizations that extended far beyond the Underhive's traditional territorial boundaries. Loading the captured contraband required 2 hours of careful work while maintaining security against potential Chrome Skull's counterattack. The materials were divided among multiple transport containers to prevent total loss if one shipment was intercepted, and our withdrawal followed alternate routes designed to confuse any pursuit attempts. The operation concluded successfully, with all personnel returning safely to Covenant territory, along with the captured materials and intelligence. The mission's aftermath brought recognition within the Iron Covenant hierarchy that elevated my status from probationary member to full operational fighter qualified for independent assignments. However, the intelligence gathered during the warehouse raid revealed criminal networks whose scope and resources posed threats that our organization might be unable to handle through conventional gang warfare tactics. Chapter 5: The Emperor's Shadow. The captured pharmaceutical shipments documentation revealed a criminal conspiracy that extended far beyond territorial disputes between Underhive gangs. As I studied the shipping manifests and communication records in the Iron Covenant's intelligence analysis chamber, the true scope of the threat facing our entire sector became terrifyingly clear. The Chrome Skulls were merely local distributors for an operation that involved corrupt Imperial officials, off-world smuggling syndicates, and heretical cult organizations planning activities that could be classified as treason against the God Emperor himself. Lieutenant Torvin Blackhand summoned the senior leadership for an emergency council session, gathering veteran fighters and intelligence specialists in the most secure location available within our territory. The meeting chamber was carved from solid rockcrete and shielded against electronic surveillance, with armed guards positioned at every access point to ensure absolute privacy during the proceedings. The gravity of the situation was reflected in the attendance. Every significant figure within the Iron Covenant hierarchy was present for discussions that could determine our organization's survival. The pharmaceutical operation is funded by the Crimson Path, a chaos cult with active cells throughout the subsector, Thorne announced, his usually calm demeanor showing cracks of genuine concern. Intelligence analysis indicates they're using combat stimulants to enhance their ritual soldiers' effectiveness, while generating revenue for weapons purchases and recruitment operations. More disturbing, several shipping routes pass through Imperial Navy facilities, suggesting corruption within the military hierarchy. The implications were staggering. Heretical cult activity fell under Imperial Inquisition jurisdiction, meaning any connection to their operations, however indirect, could result in summary execution without trial or appeal. Our seizure of their pharmaceutical shipment had unknowingly placed the entire Iron Covenant in direct conflict with enemies who possessed resources and ruthlessness that made traditional gang warfare seem like children's games. Sergeant Voss Ironlung provided tactical analysis based on his military experience and knowledge of Imperial enforcement procedures. If the Inquisition becomes involved, they'll sterilize this entire sector rather than risk cult infiltration spreading to the upper levels. We're talking about orbital bombardment followed by chemical cleansing to eliminate any possibility of chaos taints surviving. Everyone down here becomes acceptable casualties in service to the greater Imperial good. The strategic options available to our organization were uniformly grim. Fleeing the sector would mean abandoning everything we'd built, while offering no guarantee that Inquisition agents wouldn't track us to whatever refuge we established elsewhere. Attempting to negotiate with Imperial authorities would require revealing our knowledge of the cult operation, automatically identifying us as criminal conspirators worthy of elimination. Fighting was theoretically possible, but our weapons and numbers were inadequate for confronting Imperial military forces backed by Inquisition mandate. However, Marcus Chen's intelligence-gathering network had uncovered a fourth option that offered slim hope for organizational survival. My contacts in the Administratum processing centers report unusual activity among the census preparation teams, he explained, spreading official documents across the planning table. They're not conducting normal population documentation. They're specifically identifying criminal organizations and their territorial holdings for targeting by specialized enforcement units. The census operation was cover for an Inquisition investigation designed to map the Underhive's political structure and eliminate any groups that might facilitate cult infiltration or heretical recruitment. Our recent territorial expansion and successful operations against rival gangs had elevated the Iron Covenant's profile to a level that guaranteed unwanted Imperial attention. Unless we could demonstrate our loyalty to the God Emperor and usefulness to Imperial interests, we faced inevitable destruction. The solution emerged through Brother Matthias, whose religious education provided knowledge of Imperial doctrine and bureaucratic procedures that most Underhive residents lacked completely. His proposal was audacious in its simplicity. We would approach Imperial authorities directly, offering our services as auxiliary enforcement personnel in exchange for amnesty for past criminal activities and official recognition as a legitimate security organization. The Imperium has historical precedent for incorporating criminal organizations into official structures when strategic necessity requires, he explained, citing examples from across the galaxy where gang formations had been transformed into Imperial Guard regiments or planetary defense force units. The key is demonstrating that our criminal activities were motivated by survival necessity rather than actual disloyalty to the God Emperor. The plan required careful preparation and presentation to have any chance of success. We needed to document our organization's military capabilities, territorial control, and intelligence resources while emphasizing our willingness to serve Imperial interests without reservation. More critically, we had to provide valuable intelligence about the cult operation that would justify Imperial investment in our transformation from criminal enterprise to auxiliary law enforcement. My role in the preparation process involved compiling detailed maps of gang territories throughout the Underhive, documenting weapon caches and fortified positions that could be valuable for Imperial tactical planning. The work required visiting locations throughout our sector, often in areas controlled by hostile organizations that would kill anyone caught gathering intelligence about their operations. The risk was enormous, but the intelligence gathering provided essential proof of our organization's professional capabilities. The mapping project revealed the true complexity of Underhive political structures, with dozens of criminal organizations maintaining territories that overlapped and shifted constantly based on alliances, conflicts, and external pressures. Many groups operated businesses that served essential functions for Underhive residents: water purification, waste disposal, mechanical repair, and medical treatment, while generating revenue through methods that were technically illegal but practically necessary for community survival. More disturbing was the evidence of cult infiltration that appeared throughout the intelligence I gathered. Several smaller gangs displayed religious symbols and behavioral patterns consistent with chaos worship, while others had simply vanished from territories they'd controlled for decades. The Crimson Path's recruitment efforts were systematically targeting criminal organizations whose existing structure and territorial knowledge would facilitate their expansion throughout the Underhive's population centers. The formal approach to imperial authorities required navigating bureaucratic procedures that were designed specifically to discourage contact between Underhive residents and legitimate government representatives. Brother Matthias served as our intermediary, using his religious credentials to request audiences with ecclesiarchy officials who possessed sufficient authority to relay our proposal to appropriate imperial agencies. The waiting period was agonizing, with every day bringing fresh intelligence about imperial enforcement preparations and cult recruitment activities that threatened to eliminate any possibility of peaceful resolution. Chrome Skull's retaliation for our warehouse raid had escalated into open warfare that drew attention from Arbite's patrol units, while several families allied with the Iron Covenant reported contact from cult recruiters offering generous compensation for specific types of military service. The Imperial response came through Commissar Thaddeus Kane, an elderly veteran whose scarred face and augmented limbs testified to decades of service in the Emperor's name. His arrival at our meeting point, a neutral location in the abandoned Cathedral of St. Drusilla, was accompanied by a full squad of Arbite's enforcers equipped with suppression shields and crowd control weapons. The message was clear. We would be permitted to present our proposal, but any deception or sign of heretical influence would result in immediate termination. Your organization claims loyalty to the God Emperor while operating outside imperial law for years, the Commissar stated, his voice carrying the absolute authority of someone accustomed to life and death decisions. Explain how criminal enterprise serves the Imperium's interests. His challenge cut directly to the heart of our proposal's fundamental contradiction. How could activities that violated imperial law demonstrate loyalty to imperial principles? Brother Matthias provided the theological framework for our argument, drawing upon doctrinal precedent that emphasized results over methods when serving the Emperor's will. The Underhive represents abandoned territory where imperial law cannot be enforced through conventional means, he explained. Criminal organizations that maintain order and provide essential services fulfill governmental functions that would otherwise remain unfilled, creating stability that serves imperial interests even when specific activities violate formal regulations. The practical demonstration of our value came through the intelligence package we'd prepared about cult infiltration and the pharmaceutical smuggling network. The information included specific locations, personnel identifications, and operational details that would allow imperial forces to eliminate the entire conspiracy through coordinated enforcement actions. The intelligence was genuinely valuable, representing weeks of dangerous intelligence gathering that had placed multiple Covenant members at risk of discovery and elimination. Commissar Kane reviewed our materials with professional thoroughness, asking detailed questions about sources and methodology while evaluating our organization's intelligence gathering capabilities. His military experience was evident in his ability to assess tactical information and identify critical vulnerabilities in cult operations that could be exploited through imperial intervention. The process took several hours, during which our fate hung in the balance based on one man's judgment about our potential usefulness versus the security risk we represented. The final decision established a probationary relationship that transformed the Iron Covenant from criminal organization to auxiliary law enforcement unit under direct commissar supervision. Our territorial authority was officially recognized in exchange for commitment to imperial service, while our criminal activities were retroactively classified as necessary security operations conducted in areas where conventional imperial law enforcement was impractical. The transformation brought immediate changes to our organizational structure and operations. Gang markings were replaced with imperial insignia that identified us as authorized auxiliary personnel. Weapon caches were documented and officially registered, eliminating the need for concealment while ensuring adequate firepower for law enforcement duties. Most importantly, our intelligence networks were integrated with imperial surveillance systems, providing access to information resources that dramatically enhanced our operational effectiveness. However, the arrangement came with obligations that fundamentally altered our relationship with the Underhive community we'd served. We were now imperial agents operating within our former territory, responsible for enforcing laws that most residents had violated through simple survival necessity. The moral complexity of our situation became immediately apparent as we found ourselves arresting families for activities we'd previously protected and supported.